Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us from across the country. We're really excited for today's conversation focused on centering health and wellness as a foundation for Black leadership development. Before I pass it over to my amazing colleagues, I'll just briefly introduce myself and our organization. My name is Dr. Chanel Hampton. I serve as the founder and CEO of Strategic Community Partners. SCP is a national capacity building firm, and we work every day with and for communities to create equity and further equity. Day to day, that looks like strategic planning, community engagements, convenings, equity and talent work, but that also looks like the Community Impact Incubator, which we launched about a year and a half ago, and we're really excited to talk about today. For us as an organization, over the last several years, we've heard very loud and clearly from our nonprofit partners that they need capacity. They need resources and support. They are expected to somehow make 10, 15, 20 years of progress and change within 4 kids and communities in 1 month and 1 year. And I don't know if that resonates with anyone that is tuning in. But what we also know is that nonprofit leaders, particularly, it's tough. To be a Black nonprofit leader also means that you are held to a different standard. And that's the reality. You're held to a different standard. You're held to a shifting standard. You're held to a higher standard. And so for us as an organization, we wanted to make sure that we were creating a space and place that not only gave our nonprofit partners, and particularly Black-led nonprofit organizations, the resources, tools, and capacity that they needed to scale their organizations, but we wanted to center health and wellness. Because what we know is to be Black, to be a Black nonprofit leader, and to be Black in America is taxing, to say the least. So the work that each of these organizational leaders are doing, I will tell you, I am forever grateful. I'm sitting in our Detroit Community Center, which is literally kitty corner from the campus where all of our incubator organizations are housed. And so day in and day out, we see the work that they're doing with our babies on the block, with our parents and our families. And so I'm really excited to pass it over to folks who are really making the magic happen. I also want to specifically pass it over to Alyssa Williams, who serves as the Director of Equity Initiatives for SCP. The incubator, we all lovingly and jokingly say this, is Alyssa's baby. Alyssa designed this, facilitated this, and has just formed relationships and bonds with our incubator organizations that I am so grateful for. So Alyssa, I will pass it over to you and to our colleagues to really take the conversation from here. And thank you all again for joining.
Thank you so much, Chanel, for that great opening and getting us started for this conversation. I'm so excited to be here with you all and to introduce our illustrious panel. So again, thank you all for joining this session. And we hope this is an energizing, restorative, informative, empowering session that'll leave you with a Rolodex full of tools to empower yourself as a leader of color and those around you. So today I have the pleasure of being joined by an illustrious panel of leaders of color based out of Detroit, Michigan. Combined, these 3 panelists have empowered thousands of youth in the Metro Detroit area through their programming. So first, I'd like to introduce Devon Buskin. Devon is the founder and president of Detroit City Lions, an athletic club for youth that also provides wraparound services for families. Outside of his duties as the founder and president, Devon is a phenomenal coach and mentor for all those that encounter him. If I could have him on my phone to wake me up every morning, I would start every day like a leader. Next up is Richard Grundy. Using his expertise in tech, Richard co-founded Journey, a technology and entrepreneurship program. Not only does Richard educate on tech basics such as coding, website building, all of that cool stuff, but he helps youth break through systematic and generational poverty through education on entrepreneurship. And rounding us out is Sherelle Hogan. So Sherelle has many titles, including author, mentor, award winner, but foundationally, she's the founder of Pure Heart Foundation, an organization that empowers youth with incarcerated parents. Sherelle's work is inspired by her own life experiences, and she is a model of what turning a test into a testimony looks like. So I am so happy to be talking with you all. So we're going to cop out of this slideshow and just have a conversation face to face. So to start us off, I really want to talk about the experience of being a nonprofit leader prior to being a Community Impact Incubator. As we all know, working in nonprofit and working in the help fields required a lot of tenacity, hustle, heart, grit to thrive in. However, once you bring in the intersection of being a Black leader, it adds its own unique challenges and triumphs. So this question is for everybody. Prior to joining the Community Impact Incubator, what were some of the challenges that you faced as a Black leader of a nonprofit? And Richard, I'm picking on you first. Can you kick us off?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this conversation. Some of the challenges of leaders that we may face or that I faced, I had no training, no type of formal training or education in how to run a nonprofit organization, not necessarily how to even start one, how to maneuver and navigate different systems and relationships. So I would say a lot of my challenges will be wrapped around trying to like fly the plane while you're building it. I think that's what they say. And I think that's a continuous thing, right? I don't want to speak for all of the panelists, but I bet that we got here not thinking this is what we wanted to do when we went to college, but just continuously seeing issues around us and wanting to fix it. So that's what I would say is just, you know, all of the challenges you can think about with not formally being trained in something and trying to navigate it and trying to make an impact.
Thank you, Richard. Sherelle, can you add in on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you all for the opportunity and having me here today. Like Richard said, it was really just the lack of knowledge around, you know, what it took to start a nonprofit, as well as running it at the same time. I think that was my biggest challenge. I was always doing something. I was trying to, you know, fundraise and, you know, really develop my nonprofit, but still at the same time, running at the same time. So I think my biggest challenge was just having leaders that I can mirror and get advice from early in this work. And I feel like the advice and the mentorship in my leadership didn't come until Pure Heart was already developed and established. So just having that key person to help you develop your nonprofit was the biggest challenge for me.
Got you. Thank you for that insightful answer. And I'm gonna round out this question with Divine. From a tropical background, it looks beautiful.
Thanks again for inviting me. This is huge and a great opportunity. I definitely appreciate it. I would have to say that Sherelle and Richard really hit it. I agree with them 1,000%. I think that that's something that we've all had in common. I know myself, and just having conversations with them, going to college, this was not the ultimate result of what we were looking at going to. I think that for myself, you know, the passion and not having the preparation was a struggle to kind of get to where I am at this place now with running a nonprofit. Being involved and being employed through a nonprofit, but learning how to run and build one your own was a challenge. Unfortunately, I was not able to have leaders in this space that looked like me, that talked like me, that understood what we were really trying to do. You know, to have someone to gravitate to kind of teach and lead me in that way, I did not have. And what I will say is being a part of the incubator, but not only just being a part of the incubator, but being alongside these two as well. You know, I've grown a lot just by being able to have someone that looks like me, that talks like me, that has the passion for kids like me, where I've been able to really, you know, stand on their shoulders and develop. But without that incubator, it's been very difficult to really have somebody to really lean on, the guy in that space to really kind of get you to where you're trying to be.
Thank you,
Listen,
Divine.
can I just add?
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Can I just add one thing? Like, so I thought about the word. I think it's like, it can be lonely. Just, we have all of these ideas, these strategies, these things, this creativeness in our heads. But you don't necessarily have anybody to kind of like brainstorm them out or talk them through to a lot of times. That's the only thing I want to add. Sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to add something really small too. I just would add really quick access to funding. Like before the incubator, I still had the mentality of when you start something, you know, you got to kind of grind for it and hustle for it. And maybe it'll be some type of struggle. But the reality is you don't have to do that. It's a lot of money out here. And as long as we're exposed to the funding, we can get it. early, you know, in our planning stages with the nonprofit.
I was just taking some quick notes as you all were talking and just thinking about how powerful some of the words that came up. So one, thinking about like how Devon was talking about having someone who looks like him to teach and lead. And you think it's someone who's already a teacher and leader, they already would, you know, you never think about how do you pour into those who are pouring into others. You think about how the space without community can be lonely, like Richard said, and like you said, Sherelle. I'm just kind of summing it up, but like operating outside of scarcity, right? Having this community to help you find these resources, put it in front of you, you know, the nonprofit space, you know, we like to operate our heart and love, but also money pays the bills, keeps the lights on so that the kids can have the resources. So being able to move out of scarcity and work in community and abundance. So thank you all for your answers. So I'm going to transition us into our next topic. So I want to talk a little bit first about when I was building the Community Impact Incubator. So my background is in the helping field too. In the previous life, I was a social worker, worked in education. So I know that experience of working at least in a nonprofit. But when building out the incubator, I specifically designed it to have a mental health and wellness aspect as a core, because I knew that for leaders, development goes farther than bookkeeping and agendas. In the nonprofit space specifically, you must give so much of yourself to others. And bringing again about pouring into others, so much of your time is pouring into others that I was thinking, how do we intentionally pour into Black leaders and help them keep their cups full? So going into our first question, and this one is for you again, Devon. As a Black leader, what do you wish you knew about the importance of mental health before participating in the Community Impact Incubator?
So what I wish I would have knew is that it was okay to, for one, be vulnerable, that it's okay to be able to accept and deal with your trauma. As a Black leader, just like Sherelle and Richard as well, I do believe, you know, I know I created this organization to really change the narrative of the way that I grew up and opportunities I didn't have for a lot of other kids. And not knowing the effects of the trauma that I went through just growing up, being Black, young, not being fortunate, not having certain resources, those are trauma triggers. Not knowing that those are trauma for you, you know, you build that capacity up and you have no outlet. It's not being supported or pushed in the communities that I grew up in that, you know, mental health is real. Seek out therapy, seek out help, seek out support. And a lot of that was a buildup prior to me coming into the incubator. I was stressed out on different levels that I had no idea that I was stressed out on that affected my health to a point where I had a shutdown. And with the incubator, you know, my biggest thing out of that, it was great to get all of the other components of it, but the biggest piece was, to me, was the exposure, not only just exposure, but the access to be able to have therapy, to really hit that mental health piece and have that support with no judgment. To know that it was people like me that also needed it, but also had previous experience with it that supported it. But it was also mandatory for us to do it in order to participate in the incubator. So I didn't have a choice. I was forced to do something that was going to help me in a positive way, long-term health-wise, which has completely impacted my development and growth, my outlook in regards to how my organization is structured, where it's going moving forward. Now mental health awareness and accessibility of such tools are now being put into my programming. We're being able to now, you know, supply those resources to our parents, to our kids, and knowing the importance of it. But it took for me as the leader to understand that it was needed. We're suffering from it from a community. And now that I know it and being educated on it and I've been a part of it, I have to step up and provide that opportunity for other folks that look like me, that come from areas like me to experience that as well. So without that experience and being forced to do it, which was the best thing that could have happened to me, because it helped me not just professionally, but personally. And it's let me heal and build some relationships internally with my family. Now my family is supporting, you know, my organization and my nonprofit, where that was not at the beginning because of the trauma that I had and the issues that I had with them. Some things have been resolved. and I'm in a much better space of peace to be able to be more productive. So I know that the impact now that will be made will be a lot greater than what it was without that peace that now I do have.
Thank you, Divine. That was a great answer. And I really love to hear that you're integrating mental health into DLC. And you're right about how it really does impact the community. And even as you were talking, I thought about how special thinking about you and Richard, well, everybody taking part in this in therapy, right? But thinking about how for Black men specifically, therapy can be seen as not something you do, it's something that, you know, maybe weak or not typical, but I think it's great that you both are modeling what it can do to benefit you. And Richard, I'm not talking for you, right? So you good? Okay. All right. So we're going to slide the next question to you, Sherelle. So as someone who is familiar with mental health, right, a lot of your work around is working with youth that are dealing with some traumatic situations. What are some tips and tools or techniques that you've developed over the last year or even further, right, that has had the most impact on you as a leader?
It's muted. Well, I was already in therapy before I joined the incubator. So that was always really helpful for me as a leader, because not only do I do the work because it's a huge need in our community, it's a personal experience. So I had to be very careful with reliving my own trauma in the population that I serve. So I had to be intentional with making sure that mentally I was okay so that I could lead and help our young people in the community. I think some techniques and strategies that I've learned from the incubator is, one, it's okay to have that self-care time. So something that I've added to our personnel with Pure Heart is I have a mental health check-in weekly with my staff. Like, it's not about work. It's not about anything going on with Pure Heart. It's simply what's going on with you. How are you doing? Is it anything that I can do to support you in your role? And then something I also added is 8 hours a month, you are required to do some type of self-care. And you have to literally put that in your invoice, because I know the population that we serve, so much happens with them and they experience so much. So you have to be intentional with making sure that you're okay. And that, you know, you're staying on top of your own mental health, well-being. So that's something that I've added, and it's been really, really benefiting myself and our team. So.
Ooh, yes. Okay. I love that. 8 hours. You got to make them put on record, because I know social worker list would have been like, okay, whatever, I'm just gonna get some Starbucks and that's counting as my self-care. And you said, no, I want the receipts because you're gonna take care of yourself in this organization. I love it. Okay. I'm just fangirling out for a second. I really like it. But you are so right, where it's important to think about, you know, the people you work with, yourself as human first. Even though we spend so much of our time serving others and being there for others and empower other people, we are human as well, and we got to put our own needs first. Richard, I'm just going to give you opportunity if you want to throw anything in there, any additional thoughts to add on before we move on.
No, we can move on.
Okay. All right. So to round us out, I want to switch to the topic of cultural competency, right? When we think about health and wellness in the workplace. So I'm thinking about cultural competency in the sense of like, what does it mean to have spaces or a space or have an organization that can purposefully, intentionally, and excellently serve people of color? So my first question, and this is going to go to both Sherelle and Richard. So knowing that we all serve communities of color, how important is cultural competency in the health and wellness, and what techniques have you used to influence this work in your respective spaces? So Sherelle, you talked a bit about health and wellness already with your check-ins and the 8 hours of mandatory, but how else have you integrated this, thinking about the community that you serve, you know, thinking about Black, brown kids, employees, so on and so forth?
I think it's very critical, especially when you work with youth. A lot of times they're in spaces where they're not being taught by people that look like them. They're not receiving services by people that look like them. So with Pure Heart, I try to be intentional with making sure that everyone that comes through the program, one looks like them and they can understand our young people. So many times they feel misunderstood. So I try to be very, very intentional with making sure that they have a space to be heard at all times. Even though all of them have a parent incarcerated, all of their upbringings look very, very different. So I always try not to generalize even just that alone, you know, making sure that everyone in the program feels seen. And from a personnel standpoint, I'm very, very critical with you have to learn pure heart. You know, Pure Heart isn't a program that you can just look up some stats around children with incarcerated parents and think you have it down to a science. Even though we're a nonprofit, we serve as human first. Everything that we do is very personal. And that's to make sure that we're making that mental connection with our young people and from a personnel standpoint. So just being intentional, and making sure that everyone throughout the organization is heard is one of the ways that we make sure that we're staying, you know, relative and relevant when it comes to culture.
Thank you. I love it. The human first approach. So Richard, I'm gonna slide the same question to you. And then I got a specific question thinking about your background next.
Yeah, so what Sherelle said kind of really resonated with us as far as making sure that everybody is heard. And that goes from the instructors and them being able to use their creativity and impact our curriculum that they think may be beneficial for our students and the students as well. Making sure that they're heard, making sure that we're patient with our students and that we're listening. I think that's something that I learned very early on within our programming. There may seem like there's an issue, a specific issue, and it can be something completely separate or completely different. So making sure that we're patient, making sure that if there's something that we're not necessarily the best prepared to address, that we bring in different organizations and people like Sherelle, honestly, that can kind of address issues that may be, I don't know when you want to say issues, opportunities that our students may have that can be addressed, just so that they can, you know, at minimum, so they can be more successful in our program.
Sure. That's powerful. Both of you talking about how you really like listen to your students and really put their voices first. I would think if you're someone who has experience in a hardship in your life, and especially if you think about kids, one of the most important things is being heard, to know that someone's listening, someone cares, and someone's going to act based on what they said. So thank you both. So Richard, I have a specific question for you, thinking about your tech background. So the tech space, at least I would say from my side of the world, is typically seen as white. And so from your perspective, like from teaching coding to Youth of Color and other tech things that wasn't traditionally, you know, put in the Black and brown community, what are some solutions to create more culturally competent or culturally responsive spaces in traditionally non-POC areas?
So I've been thinking about this, and so for me personally, I can kind of talk about a experience that I had going through a coding boot camp, right? Where I wasn't like most people in that program in a lot of different ways. I was probably a little bit older when I went through that program. My interests weren't Star Trek and Star Wars and things like that in that program, right? I put up all my own money, you know what I mean? So I'm coming from a different background in terms of what I was sacrificing to be there. So making sure that when we start our programs, we kind of understand our students and you know, the students that we may have had, you know, in cohort 17 may not be the same students or have the same interests in cohort 19, and really getting to know them and allowing them to kind of impact our class, making sure that they're connected and making sure that, you know, they feel connected within it. I think camaraderie is very important in this type of immersive program, because there's a lot of like emotional peaks and valleys. And that's with any coding program, regardless of where, I would say that's with most coding programs, regardless of where it is or what neighborhood or whatever community. And knowing that, okay, if this is going to be an emotional roller coaster in this community, why would it not be an emotional roller coaster in our community, right? And really being prepared for that and explain it to students ahead of time. Hey, this is going to be up and down. You know what I'm saying? We're going to be patient with you, but make sure that you're patient with yourself. You know, so I think that, you know, organizations, companies, they have to realize that, right? They have to continue to keep that top of mind. Like this is an emotional thing, and it can be, and you have to be patient. You have to understand the interest of your employees or whoever your organization, whoever is coming in there, and make them feel welcome so that you can get the best for your you know what I'm saying? So that you can get the best for your organization. We all have some things of value to provide. Some of those experiences that may have been trauma, there's some type of value in those, right? There's something in those experiences sometimes that a lot of times that can improve organizations. So, you know, just hopefully helping, if everybody can communicate those things in the correct way when they're ready to, they can kind of make their organization better, and the organization needs to be ready to kind of receive those.
Thank you so much. That was a very thoughtful answer. And I could even, as soon as you tilted your head at the beginning, I was like, oh, he's about to get into it.
Yeah. I want to add one thing to it though, right? It's confidence. Confidence is important for our community when we're going into these organizations as well, so that we can recognize the value that we're bringing from these experiences that we've had prior. And sometimes we may try to hide those experiences, or we may not necessarily know how to communicate them, but we have to, you know, I think my job is to make sure that our students are confident to understand the value that they're bringing, and even in some of those experiences. I hope that makes sense.
It does. It makes you think about when you're saying about how some of the things you may have experienced are opportunities or things that you can lift up to empower you. Like, that makes complete sense. Going back to that, turning the test into a testimony, using those experiences that are hardships to like power you forward. So I have a couple more. I'm just gonna do a couple questions that came up as we were all talking, right? So one, Richard, you're on the hot spot one more time, and then I'll go to everybody else. I'll leave you alone for a second. But could you talk to us a little bit, just briefly? I remember when the pandemic started, and one thing that people didn't think about was the technology gap, right? About who has computers, who can do online education, things of that nature. Can you talk a little bit about your work in that area? Just because I know you work with Youth of Color and we're in Detroit, so I thought that would be a great thing to throw in.
As far as what we do, or how I felt when it really hit.
How you helped out. I remember there being some computers loaned out.
Yes. So in 2019, we started this thing called the Community Tech Trust, where we would have these laptops that were donated to us. They're all decommissioned from foundation organizations, and we would loan them out to other organizations doing similar work, because we understand what it's like to not have the digital resources. When the pandemic hit, everything kind of changed. I noticed we shut down for a couple weeks, and I just kind of I'm gonna talk about how I felt initially, if you don't mind. I remember talking to my friends who had kids that were in school, and sometimes, you know, a lot of them were in other school districts in the school district we mainly work in. And they were talking about how they either were given devices by the schools, or they already had devices, right? And this was just to take English and math, like the real important subjects, right? And I think coding is important as well, but it's not. English and math is like water. And I remember our district, the districts that we work in, they were shut down, and the kids didn't have anything. So not only could they not do coding, which, okay, but they couldn't do math and English. And I kind of felt like, wow, were we really even addressing the digital divide, right? So instead of us just loaning our technology out to organizations, now we're kind of loaning them out to individuals. Sometimes they come back, sometimes they don't. But, you know, this is something that's needed, you know, devices, laptops, being connected to the internet is important in a lot of different ways. So
thank you for sharing about that. And that's, like you said, it was things that people didn't think about, and it kind of got pushed to the forefront when everything started with the pandemic, and a lot of disparities pulled out. So yeah, also appreciate you being a solution. Sure did. So Sherelle, I'm gonna come over to you. So I want you to think about so I want you to think about what advice you would give to maybe leaders, managers, funders, if they're listening in, right? The folks who put the dollars out there, about what should they do to center health and wellness for Black leaders? Like in an ideal world, if you're like, you know what, if this leader, this funder could help center this work, what would they do? And this doesn't go to everyone, but I just want to kick it off with you, Sherelle.
From a funding standpoint, I think just acknowledge that that's a need that needs to be approved on line items. I think a lot of times when, leaders are set to make their budget, a lot of funders see programming, technology or actual itemized things as a priority, and they forget the key thing, which is personnel. And then the follow-up to that is supporting personnel through their mental health and wellness journey, through benefits and everything, that matriculates down through that sector. So from a standpoint, acknowledging that needs to be addressed. And then as a leader or a community partner with a nonprofit, just creating more spaces that acknowledges people of color, particularly in leadership roles, their work. I think a lot of times leaders are only acknowledged based on outcomes and great things that happen through the organization as a general. And it's never a time where a leader is just recognized for being a leader, for actually doing the work, not just the outcome of the organization, if that makes sense. So I think creating spaces to acknowledge that mental health and wellness is critical. As a leader, it's very, very critical. I can't pour from an empty cup. I can't lead if I'm all out of whack mentally, because I'm not going to be able to give my best. And in order for a person to give their best financially, they need to be stable. Mentally, they need to be stable. They need to have the basic needs in life so that they can, go out and lead. So that would be my advice.
Ooh. That was great advice too, right? We in there right there with Maslow hierarchy. You need your basic needs met before you can even ascend up. So Devon, I'm gonna kick the same question to you. What advice, in your ideal world, what could managers, leaders, and funders provide to center Black wellness?
Well, for one, it's hard to follow up behind that, Sherelle. You done killed the thunder off of that one.
Mic drop.
I definitely mic drop. I would just piggyback off of her and say that just having really close relationships to funders and being in the room with funders in regards to suggestions and questions that they have to work with nonprofits and Black-led nonprofits here locally in the city of Detroit. Sherelle is absolutely right. These are the line items that they're not paying any focus to. Everything is around programmatic pieces. And not the human component that make those programs happen, that you ultimately want the outcomes to happen from that. And I just think from, just speaking to funders from that aspect is to, really do the research and understand that it is a disparity in Black and brown communities and people of color in these communities that lack that support, that do not have the resource to that, do not know where to go get it from. So funding dollars need to be allocated more to that, to provide those resources for people of color. But also there needs to be some form of groups, also support groups that can support those people of color once they step into that realm. It's one thing to break that barrier, which we all are trying to knock barriers that our kids and our families have. What about the barriers that we're trying to break as Black and brown and people of color as leaders? We have barriers as well, and this mental health wellness piece is a huge barrier. So once we cross into that threshold, being able to have those support groups to support our transition into that is huge and is key. And I think just as being a Black leader organization, I definitely agree with being recognized as just that leader, but also just being recognized as being a human. We make mistakes, we're not perfect. We do have an ultimate goal that I feel that God or higher being that you believe in put a passion in your heart to do such. But we do have our weak moments. And at that point, that is where these type of conversations and these groups are key to make sure that we're staying in conversation and the support is there. Because a lot of times if we're not supporting each other, we can't get it from anywhere else. And I think with that standpoint and that backing of support, it would help the mental peace that way as well as Black and brown leaders.
Thank you, Devon. That's a really good. I really like what you said about having those areas of support and thinking about who are those people when you are, like you said, down or you're feeling weak or you make a mistake that lift you up versus tearing you back down, right? I think everybody's had that experience where you have that manager or that person where you make a small mistake and they just tear it up and it's like, where's your morale? All you needed was a little help and you could have just soared past it. Anyway, so Richard, I'm gonna ask you the same question. What's on your mind? What are you thinking about this?
I agree with both Sherelle and Devon. Number one, as far as like the funding aspect, right? So like a lot of organizations or funders, there's funding for programs, but there's not necessarily a lot of interest in funding the organization and the personnel. And if you think about it, we're unique in that we want to impact our communities. I can tell you, I don't have Devon or Sherelle's schedule, but I know they don't work 9 to 5. I know there's a lot of late nights. I know that we've all probably operated under-resourced, right, with budgets and things like that. And that definitely takes a toll on us as individuals. And I think that kind of transfers over to the mental part, the mental health part. So those two things, and just keeping that in mind. Like there's not going to be, it's not easy to find people to work in to collaborate in this work or to work in this field, because there's a different level of compassion that's needed and patience that's needed. It's not just, these are the skill sets. Okay, you can come in. You know what I'm saying? You got to really prove that. So a lot of times this can be lonely. So, just keeping those things in mind when they're looking at how they support organizations. So I think that's what I want to leave with. I think they said everything else.
Got you. And I'm just gonna co-sign that none of y'all work 9 to 5, including Chanel, who was up top and did our opening. I swear that y'all have a different set of hours in a week than us normal people do. I don't know how you all love it. I feel like y'all have 5 jobs. So just throwing that out there. Apply. Thank you all for your dedication. And with that, we're gonna slide into our Q&A section. So we're opening it up to the audience to ask any questions that you might have for our panelists, for myself, for Chanel, but mainly hoping you all ask Richard, Sherelle, and Devon, experts on this, some awesome questions. And I just want to thank all of the comments that came through that have been supportive. I don't know if you all have had a chance to see the chat, but people are loving what you all are sharing. So we're going to give it a few seconds. I learned in a facilitation class that it takes 7 seconds for people to process information. So we're going to give them a few to think through and throw some questions in the chat.
I'm going to use that so much.
The 7 seconds?
What you just said? Yeah, I'm telling everybody that.
It's important. People don't think about that little introvert pause where you're like, I need a second to think about what you said. Right. So we're going to kick us off with a quick question. So in your past work, maybe in some partnerships, have you ever witnessed performative allyship in the nonprofit or social sector? And what are some ways you think are to prevent that, right? So people come in and you're like, are you really down? Or are you just doing this because you think it looks good? Yes, I'd love to hear your experiences. Whoever wants to pick that one up.
I'll take a shot at it. So what's funny is I'm actually going through that right now. We've been doing some really great work prior to the incubator. What I will say is since the incubator, we have had a lot more exposure throughout the city, throughout some other supporting counties, with individuals that we've been trying to partner with that would not sit down and have a conversation with us. But now that we've received a little bit more press, I really think they're seeing the impact. It's kind of like they want to hop on the bandwagon. And myself and my leadership are really diving in on really looking into their backgrounds to really make sure that this is something that they really believe in our mission. We've had to walk away from a couple different funders Just within the last couple of weeks, it didn't match up. It would not be a great partnership. I felt that the dollars that they were providing were not genuine, and it was strictly business, and that's not what we believe in, nor do we want to feel that our kids can be bought for a photo. So I think as a leader in this space, this is something that's going to be ongoing. I think that this is where it comes in, where you have this relationship with other leaders of other organizations that may have previous experience to these, the people in these particular relationships, and really having that conversation of truth of, is this right for our organization? But I think that you are going to bump your head. I don't think you're going to always make the right decisions, but I think that once you make that wrong decision, you need to try to correct it as soon as possible, and try to break away from that relationship. But it's going to come as long as you continue to make impact. People will only believe in what they can see sometimes, and it's unfortunate. And people like the press, and they like the limelight, and they like the great things, but they don't understand the work that it took to get there. And you will have to make those decisions as you grow your organization, or as your leadership develops, or your succession plan goes. You just have to make sure that you kind of really evaluate those relationships and know who is really for you and who is not. And it's a struggle, and it's something that I think that myself and the others continue to battle. But with more experience, you'll make the right decisions behind it.
Ooh, that was a good one. The whole time we're gonna put this as a black space. I was thinking about the Mike Jones song, right? Back then, y'all didn't want me. Now I'm hot. They all on. So I just want to open it up on our last 3 minutes of our session. So I just want to open it up if any of the panelists have anything else that they want to say, any call to actions, anything they want to share out, before we get into our closing. Okay. Okay, I'm sliding one more quick question because we had one slide in. And thank you, Sharnae, for sending this over. So actually, Sherelle, I'm gonna shoot it to you really quickly. How do you handle burnout when it comes up?
That's a great question, because I just experienced that a few months ago. When I experienced burnout, I didn't recognize that I was experiencing it until like a month after. And I did a lot of research around burnout, and it shows that you don't know that you're burned out until like 6 months after you've already experienced it. So I was trying to figure out, I was going to therapy and, really trying to figure out like, where's my passion and where's my drive? I'm not on it anymore. I'm finding myself doing the bare minimum, literally just like only enough to get by. I wasn't waking up every morning and going to bed with pure heart on my mind anymore. And I had to recognize that for the last 6 years, I have been going. I never took an intentional break. Every time that I sat down, I was forced to. I got sick or COVID. Something literally had to happen in terms of a pandemic for me to really sit down and not work. So in that moment, one, I had to recognize that I was experiencing burnout, but two, being very conscious on making sure that that doesn't happen again. So being intentional with doing self-care, making sure that I am being consistent with my mental health and wellness, and then also not feeling bad about not working. Like we living in a society now is if you're not working, you should feel bad, or you're a bad person if you go on vacation, or if you neglect your organization for a week or two. No, like as long as you're working smart, it's okay to not work as hard anymore. And as your organization grow, you'll be able to have team and, you'll be able to delegate more. So you're not experiencing burnout. So that's my take on it.
Ooh, that was a jewel. Okay, from top to bottom. And I want to go back to that thing of like, you don't have to struggle. Like you said, you don't have to struggle for success. You work smarter, not harder. And you just focus on yourself. I love that. All right, y'all.
I just want to, you need to wrap, but I want to add one quick thing. It's good to have people that understand that you may be around you, that you need to set some boundaries, and they can help reinforce you and help tell you when you need to take a break as well. Or be like, hey, you said you're about to take a break, chill out for real. And it's a work in progress thing. It's not cold turkey, but I would say that's important as well too.
You 100% right. Having that accountability buddy, because sometimes you don't see it until it's too late, and somebody who can reel you in. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and close out. So I'm going to share our screen for our final few moments. So all of this, we hope that you all found this empowering, helpful, something to keep in your pocket for your work in the future. If you want additional resources, please visit our wellness page, strategiccommunitypartners.org/wellness. So there you'll find a number of resources that are focused for people of color, leaders of color, and people in your community, just to help them get a little bit closer to that wellness, to that divine alignment. And as always, if you are interested, seek out your local mental health professional. So none of us on this call we're just folks who have had encounters with them, who have put our mental health first and said, you know what, how do we change this for ourselves, for our families, for our community, to make sure that we are restored and ready to rock and roll. So I just want to thank you all for coming out and listening to our panel. Thank you all so much for joining. And I hope that you have a restorative, well, woke, loving, cup full weekend. And I'll see you all next time.